Good evening and hello from Newport, Rhode Island. I'm at the car storage facility of the Audrain Collections here in Newport, and we're bringing you the latest in our series of virtual seminars presented by the Audrain Newport Concours and Motor Week. And I'm Donald Osborne, the CEO of the Audrain. We'd like to welcome you to the latest in this series, where we get to talk to folks in the automotive world who have touched the Audrain Collections in one way or another, or are people who are very interesting and whose stories we think that you will enjoy hearing as we continue in the Audrain's mission to preserve, celebrate, and share automotive history. And our last virtual seminar, which is Chasing the Checkered Flag, was very well received. We interviewed three very exciting and very dynamic women who are very active in the field of motorsport, both historic and contemporary motorsport. And tonight, we're taking a look into an area that really excites me. It's something that I have a great passion for, which is automotive restoration. And that's a great actual lead-in because our guest tonight is Brian Oliver, the managing partner of Automotive Restorations, Inc. in Stratford, Connecticut. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening, Donald.
And we're speaking with Brian. Brian is someone I've known for quite a while, and he's somebody who has just some slight experience in the automotive restoration business, which we'll hear about in a moment. But I've known him and the organization which he heads for quite a while. They're a company that has restored cars at the highest level and has shown and won awards across the United States and in Europe as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about what Automotive Restorations does. But one of the reasons why we're talking to Brian tonight is the fact that Automotive Restorations has been entrusted by the Audrain with two very, very special cars from the collection. Two cars which were from the collection of Nick Begovich in Fullerton, California, which the Audrain acquired last year. And many of those cars will be featured in an upcoming exhibition called Engineering and Design Equals Passion, the Nick Begovich collection. These are a collection of cars that run the gamut from a 1962 turbocharged Corvair to what is arguably the most original Porsche 904 GTS on the planet, plus not one but two of the ultra-rare Pegaso sports cars of Spain, and an even more rare ATS 2500 GTS, which we'll talk about tonight. And so, Brian, to start, let's just sort of take a quick look around Automotive Restorations. We were there a couple of weeks ago and shot this video. So while this video rolls, we can talk about what it is that we're taking a look at.
Sure, absolutely.
So I think we're looking at your main facility, and how large is that, Brian?
Yes, this is the main facility. The main building is 40,000 square feet. We do have storage off-site a couple blocks away. It's about 15,000 square feet for winter and long-term storage.
And in addition to restoration, here we're looking at your showroom. So you also do automotive sales as well.
Correct. Yep, we do sales, and yeah, exactly, consignment and some of the acquisition for customers too.
And in terms of the restoration work that you do, here we're looking at a part of the shop.
Yes.
You do all phases of restoration work there in the shop: mechanical, paint, trimming as well. Yes.
Correct. Yes. Yep. We have our own upholster. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I guess everything except for plating.
Correct. Yeah, plating, which is nobody wants to do on in-house for medical reasons. So yeah, that all goes out.
And of course, you have an engine shop and
Correct.
a dynamometer.
Yes.
And so it's really a full service shop. And as you can see from these images, the range of cars in which you work is quite vast, from classics to muscle cars.
It is. Yep. Yep. And that's evolved over time. Most customers have more than one car, and usually different varieties. We have 20 craftsmen, all with their own unique abilities. So that's how we're able to cover this many different projects and different makes and cars. From a Kissel, as you see there, to a Ferrari.
And so one of the things that, and by the way, we invite all of you out there watching to watching the show live, of course. We'll post this later on our YouTube channel, which in case you will not have this opportunity. But if you're watching the show live tonight, you can also use the Q&A feature of Zoom to ask questions. Ask Brian any questions that you might have about the restoration process, about his career and life in restoration, and what an owner needs to think of in terms of restoration or preservation in a car, which we'll talk about a bit later tonight. Brian, how does a customer of automotive restorations typically find you? How do they come to you?
Mostly at this point is word of mouth. We started in 1978. We have a pretty good reputation, I believe, and it's a small world, the car, collector car world, and that really isn't the majority, is word of mouth.
And those are people who have seen your work in shows that you've done, and also obviously spoken to friends who have been clients of yours over the years. And that's obviously the most heartening way for any business. It's the easiest form of business acquisition there is.
Yeah, absolutely.
A satisfied customer and a beautiful car. So how much of your work would be divided into full restorations, what people would consider sort of soup to nuts, bare metal, ground up restorations, versus maintenance or repair work?
Yeah.
How would that divide?
Yeah, the 25% of the business would be a full restoration, and that's sort of changed over time. A lot more cars come to us restored or an older restoration. So service would be, the largest part of the shop. But there's still, there's anywhere from 5 to 7 full restorations happening. Complete frame off, as they say, at any given time.
That brings me to another very interesting point, which is something that I've spoken with a lot of people, friends and clients alike about. There is an idea that some collectors have that I buy a car and I either restore it or it's already restored. And so I do nothing to the car from now. It's like buying a new car. I just sort of wash it occasionally and that's it. But a restoration has a lifespan. And some restorations have a longer lifespan than others. So what is different in restoring a car which has never been restored before and re-restoring an older car, a car with an older restoration rather?
Yeah, we always prefer, I think this is also in, in homes and buildings, you want something that's been, you get a restoration from the 80s and they did a nice job, but, the technology wasn't there or the replacement parts weren't there. So you see a fiberglass patch because, they weren't going to make a piece of sheet metal. So it's usually better to find a car that hasn't been touched rather than somebody that's been in there. And it's pretty rare. Most things have had some sort of restoration at some point in their life.
And in looking at projects that you will take on for restoration, obviously you have good clients that you like to work with and whose collecting you respect and you want to do the best for them. But someone just unknown to automotive restoration says, I saw one of your cars at a show. Someone I know has a friend who had one of their cars restored by you, and they drive in with their car. What is the first step that you take with them in trying to evaluate the job and seeing if it's a job that you want to do?
Yeah, what we do is we take the car in, we spend usually about a day with it. We'll do a leak down compression on the engine to understand the health. While it's on the lift, we're looking at structure. We're looking at, paint. We can meter the paint. We can see if there's been a patch. We can, measure the amount of material that is on there. Upholstery is pretty straightforward. You can see what it needs or not. And what I do is I put it all together in an outline, and it's broken down in categories, drive line, brakes, suspension, paint, metalwork, body work. And then we look at it and we assign time to it. Our best guess, doing it for many, many years, we have an idea what a floor would take to, be changed in a Porsche 356. And then we, make a decision and move forward, depending on, how far somebody wants to get. We don't like to get too deep. We want to be as upfront as we can. So, the customer knows what they're getting into. You don't want to strip it to bare metal and say, oh, now it's another $50,000. That doesn't go well for anybody. So try to lay it out.
Well, a question which often comes up, I know when over the years I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and I would view it as sort of a fundamental misunderstanding of what the restoration process is about. But I want to get your take because you are a leading restorer. People have the idea, well, I want to restore my car, but I don't want to restore my car. I mean, I'm not going to take it to Pebble Beach, or I'm not going to take it to the Audrain Newport Concours and try to win best of show. I just want it to really look nice. So just restore my car to look nice.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah.
Is there such a thing?
It's difficult because, it's just a driver quality. But, how do you, paint, which is something that you see. It's difficult to not follow it through all the steps. Maybe you don't wet sand and buff it as much, but it's difficult. There really isn't driver quality. In Pebble Beach, you may not do as much on a harness or an engine bay, as far as detail, but the body is sort of really only one way you can do it, which is correct, which takes time, unfortunately. So, you may not do chrome or, bright work, we call it. So there's ways to sort of not do it all, but the problem is when you put new paint on something, then, everything else sort of, when the chrome looked okay, now it doesn't anymore with fresh paint. So.
Yeah, there's a wonderfully cascading effect with which I am painfully familiar when you just say you want to do a rolling restoration and all of a sudden it becomes, let's just do it all because I can't bear to look at that anymore. Sure,
absolutely. And there's also duplication of labor. You have different things apart. So there's only the time to replace that part or that seal. So, we try to work smart in that sense too.
That brings up another very interesting point that I think is a fascinating aspect of the restoration business, which is the fact that in general, cars were meant to be constructed, not restored.
Correct.
And the way cars went together is not necessarily the way they come apart and then go back together.
Mm-hmm.
What, if you can name it, what period of car or type of car is the most difficult in your experience from that point of view?
What I find most recently to be the most difficult is stuff from, sort of late 70s and 80s, because it's gotten a little more complicated. You don't have the support from the world of restoration, like an E-type. Obviously, there's most stuff is reproduced from the bonnet to, calipers and, basically everything. But you get a car from the 70s that isn't quite there yet, or even 80s, that needs a restoration and just doesn't have the support. So those have become, or I would say they're the most complicated. And I think as time goes on, they'll be supported, whether it's a rubber, weather stripping or things like that, or glass, and, so they will become simpler, but those, are the most difficult.
That is actually a great lead in. And one of the things that I have to say about this entire series that we've done is that all of the guests that we've had have been absolutely perfect, because these obviously are not scripted. It's just you and me. We talk vaguely about what we would chat about, and I just throw things at you and you answer gamely, and it's quite wonderful. But you as our previous guests have, give me wonderful lead-ins, which is a lot of people ask the question, what will happen in 20 or 30 years when we try to restore cars that are built in the 2010s and the 2020s with lots of electronic parts, very, very specific, bespoke electronic parts, vacuum formed plastics and other materials that are made specifically for that, which is very, very different from what we sort of call the blacksmith cars, steel, wood, chrome, glass, What do you think the challenge is going to be, and will we be able to restore them?
Yeah, I think, obviously anything can be restored. I mean, that's sort of the question, I've had in the past, can it be done? And anything is doable. You'll see more aftermarket support, as Aston Martin and Ferrari, no longer support these, these cars because they're, 10, 20 years old. You see it even with, ABS modules were always a problem. And now, you can send them out and have them rebuilt. So there'll be issues, but, I think with 3D printing and all of that, the aftermarket parts world, we'll be able to get them back on the road,
And that's another great point. You mentioned 3D printing.
Yeah.
And here I have to, again, give a nod of the hat to the great craftsmen that you have working there at Automotive Restorations, because one of the great sort of misnomers or misunderstandings about 3D printing is that, oh, I can just make this old part. No big deal. Just scan it, print it. But of course, you're taking a worn part.
Yes.
And unless you understand how it's worn and what it's supposed to look like, you'll create a brand new worn part, which won't be very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And most likely, whatever part you're producing, they all wear the same way, whether it's a gear and a gearbox or a door striker or a stay to hold it open. So yeah, it's something you have to be aware of.
And so we started talking a little bit about how you determine what needs to go into a restoration. And obviously something which is very, 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 as they say in the courtroom, strike that. I'm not going to go there yet. I'm going to go someplace else first, because we were talking about re-restoration.
Yeah.
And one of the things that in the Begovich collection cars that we acquired, most of the cars had not been driven since the early 1980s. And only one of them actually had been out since that time, taken out briefly in 2004. So they had sat for a long time, and they sat in a way that was not designed for long-term storage, which presented various challenges. But we also wanted to make sure in recommissioning the cars that we honored the history of the cars with Nick Begovich. Now, as it happens, the two cars that you have there at Automotive Restorations from the Begovich collection, one of them was in mid-restoration when the collection was acquired, and it was always understood that obviously the restoration had to be completed.
Yes.
And the second was a car which we had hoped to keep in its original as found state. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, that we made a decision to go in a slightly different direction. But let's first talk about the car that was in mid-restoration. If we can see the video of the Pegaso. And again, it was sort of a no-brainer to have you do this car. This is, again, as we mentioned at the beginning of the program, a very rare car, a Spanish sports car built to an extremely high standard by a truck manufacturer, Enasa, on a government brief. Wilfredo Ricard, a brilliant engineer who had been the chief engineer at Alfa Romeo before World War II and during the war, went back to his native Spain and was tasked with bringing the engineers of this truck company up to an international standard by challenging them to build an incredibly complex car. Wherever there was an easy way to do something, Ricard found the hardest way possible to do it. But you folks are very familiar with these cars. You've restored a number of them already.
Yes. Yes.
So tell us about your experience with Pegasos.
Yeah, so we know them well. We have, this is chassis number 0149. We have 0150, which we're finishing up now. And this was pretty far along, very complete, which is something that I always look for, especially with a, restoration and process, to make sure that we have all the parts, especially with a car, that is this rare. Overall, good. We ran the engine on the dyno. We did have a few leaks, rebuilt the water pump, resealed everything, and, it runs well. So we sort of started there with the idea, if there was a problem with the engine, we had time to get some machine work done. The body and upholstery is pretty straightforward for the most part, and we know what we're going to get into there. But always machine work is concerning, especially with the Pegaso engine and the lack of availability for parts. We know we're going to have to make something if it's a problem. So.
Yeah, I'll also explain a little further. I probably could have done a better job of setting this up, but the car was undergoing a restoration which was about 20 or 25 years in the making. The engine had been rebuilt about 25, 26 years ago. The body had been prepped and painted. Upholstery had been done for most of the interior, but final assembly had not been begun. And at a certain amount of time, what do you have to do in looking at someone else's restoration to determine what you must do just simply through due diligence?
Yeah, well, with an engine like this that had sat this length of time, and we weren't exactly sure how far the rebuild had gone, we started there. The paint overall has held up well. It has some shop wear from, hanging around out there for, 20, 25 years. So at that point, we determined there's some gaps in the doors and the trunk lid and hood that need work. So we're going to end up, we'll paint the whole car. But, the body work that's been done was done well, and a lot of that will be salvageable. So, the wire harness hadn't been reproduced. That's been done now. Gauges, instruments have been rebuilt. So all that's been taken care of. So, initially when it comes in, we lay everything out and make a plan, and start with the hardest or most time-consuming components and work back the other way. The things that we can control, but not, like a body and metalwork portion of the restoration. So.
And one of the things that became certainly evident, I love Pegaso cars. I've loved them for a very, very long time. And I'm absolutely thrilled that we actually now have 2 in the collection here. And whenever I come down to visit your shop, I always spend time getting as close to the Pegasos in your shop as I possibly can. And it's really interesting too, speaking with your folks there, especially with Charlie, who's doing most of the work on this car. Yeah. It's fascinating to see having 0149 next to 0150. The differences between the 2 cars, 1 number off.
Yeah.
And that's also a very interesting thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. Radio versus the heater and just some little odd things. But yeah, there's differences for sure.
And we were, I was looking at the dynamometer readings for the Pegaso, and it was also quite fascinating because so few of them were made, and because of the methods in which they were made, actually following the factory procedures and specs does not give you the best performance. Correct, and through a lot of trial and error and expert experience, certainly you've got the engine running now better and stronger than it did when it left the factory in Madrid.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, just
Barcelona, sorry.
Yeah, a little cam timing will make the difference. So yeah, I was that.
Especially on a 4-cam engine.
Yeah.
4 cams, no waiting.
Yeah.
And so, that's sort of a straightforward picking up of a restoration and completing it. Mm-hmm. Now, the other Begovich car that we have there at Automotive Restorations is a completely different story. If the Pegaso is a rare car, then the cars of Automobili Turismo e Sport are practically indescribable. And this is a car that, again, it looked perfectly wonderful when I saw it for the first time in the Begovich garage out in Fullerton, California. And it looked a little worn, a little tired, but thought, okay, we just sort of give it a nice polish, complete the engine, and get it back out on the road. Mm-hmm. And when it came to your shop, we discovered that we had to make another decision. So let's take a look at the video of where the ATS sits now, and then we can talk about some of the things that are happening. So this is not a car that is ready to drive at this point.
Correct. Yes. It's gone the other. So that's in bare metal primer, and that's where it is now, and in body shop for metalwork.
And have to explain that again, one of the things about this, they manufactured, it's thought, about 24 chassis during the 2-year life of the company back in the 1960s, 63 to 65. And these cars, the 2.5 liter and a 3 liter model, a model for the street with fully upholstered interior and sound deadening, and a racing model, of which this is an example, an alloy one. These cars were incredibly beautiful. They're the second mid-engine production car ever made, beaten only by a month by the Matra Jet. And they were quite groundbreaking. The people that created them were ex-Ferrari employees who left in the famous Palace Revolt in 1962. Carlo Chitti, who later went on to start Auto Delta, the performance arm, racing arm for Alfa Romeo, and Giotto Bizzarini, who went to work for Lamborghini. He later worked with Piero Rivolta and then built his own cars. And so this car is also a beautiful design by Franco Scaglione, built by Carrozzeria Alemano. And it's a car that perhaps 9 were made and 6 exist. So where do you start?
Yeah. Well, when you look at a car, you look at the sort of the time period, and that's, we were fortunate enough that this was very original and very complete. There were a few things taken off, but we had that to look at and document. So we knew how to sort of move forward. And again, when you look at, you get that question as well, how do you know what would have been? But you go back to that period in time and look at what was available and, what paints would have been used and what techniques, they would have used during, the assembly of the car. So.
And much like another, I was going to say very low production car, but again, compared to an ATS, a Tucker was a mass production car.
Yeah.
But the ATS cars that were built were all essentially prototypes. And it was fascinating going through the car with you and your folks there at Automotive Restorations to see how it was made. You can see that where they changed their mind about how something was going to be done and how things are done. And how do you make the decisions of what to fix and what to leave?
Yeah, the decision, you and I talk about it. That's, as the restorer or behind the restoration. Some of the things that were done, they should say, because that was part of this creation, that was part of this car. And some of them you don't see, when the upholstery's in and most of the assembly is done. But, we leave a lot of that. We dress up and clean up some of the welds that are questionable because we don't want any structural failures. But, we leave a lot of that because it is part of the car, it's part of the history for sure.
And one of the things that, what were the sort of the trigger points that made you come to the decision to recommend to us that we go with a full restoration rather than trying to preserve what we had when we found the car?
Once we were able to lift it up and take a look, there was quite a bit of corrosion, where the body, was connected at the chassis or, the frame, which was steel. So that was one of the major issues. And then second, some of the stuff was apart, like the engine, we didn't know if it was going together or it was going, or in the process of coming out. So it was sort of at that point, we had so many unknowns, we made the decision to, so many unknowns along with the corrosion to, move forward and do a complete restoration rather than, you're at that point, it might as well just come all the way apart. So.
One of the things, of course, that you bring up to talk about corrosion, I mentioned the fact that it's an alloy car. And we had this chat the other day about the fact that there are so many people that think, well, my car's aluminum, so therefore it can't rust.
Yeah.
But not whenever there is steel and aluminum, what happens?
Yeah.
They don't like each other very much.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. You go back to chemistry and the periodic table and metals that interact with one another. So that's what you have there.
And on a larger scale, thinking about the restoration business, the fact that you are working to restore cars, the ATS is not that old, it's a 1964 car, but you're working to restore cars in some cases that were never designed to last more than 4 or 5 years. Their makers never intended someone 50 years later to want to rebuild the car or preserve it or indeed make it as new again.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, for sure there was planned obsolescence. No one in, Ford, Chevy, any of these companies didn't plan on having these or expect these cars to still be on the road today. So that is part of the challenge. It's parts that have worn out that should have never worn, a control arm. The bushing is supposed to wear, but when you get beyond that, you have an issue. So part of the challenge.
And it's indeed, and what makes it quite interesting, and I can talk about challenges in a second. One of the things that also I found fascinating about the ATS, again, a car that I absolutely love, and I can't wait to drive this car, is the fact that we saw the structure of the car. Actually, can we play the video again, please? Because it's something very interesting, I think, that people will be curious to see. Because again, this is a sports racing car. They made the street luxury version, but you see where the sills underneath the doors, you see those straps, the fuel tanks go in the sills underneath, which people think, oh, okay, that's really interesting. But of course, again, for a race car, that's perfectly terrific. It's great weight balance.
Yes.
And quite practical, keeps it out of the way of the other things you have to package. But that was one of those determining points of the restoration, the fact that the fuel is mounted there, so you need to make sure that those tanks are actually securely mounted. And the other great discovery was the plastic crossover tube that goes through the chassis carrying the fuel from one side to the other. So for instance, for that, in the restoration, will we put a plastic tube back in?
Yeah, we'll use a new nylon or plastic that's, ethanol rated, as the years have gone on, make sure you use the correct hose or product. But yeah, that's what we'll use, for the flexibility. I don't believe, because of where the position is, it needs to be flexible in order to get it in. So.
Which is a very good thing because,
Yeah.
again, going back to my statement about some cars were designed to be constructed and not restored.
Yes.
A lot of cars, especially sports racing cars, were designed to be put together, taken out to the race, run, brought back to the factory, completely taken apart, and rebuilt.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, practicality of service was not high on the points there.
Yeah.
And now, speaking of that, we're going to be bringing you another project very shortly, which is a very historic car, a Cooper Monaco King Cobra. That is a very historic car, the last car that Dave McDonald drove and won in Kent, Ohio, before his unfortunate death in testing and qualifying, rather, at Indy. And again, with a car like the ATS, with a car like the Cooper Monaco, where decisions have to be made about the moment that you are basically celebrating in the car's history. We have that question with the ATS. We have photographs of the car. When we acquired the car is a deep red, almost a burgundy color. But in stripping the car, a lighter color was found underneath. So those are some of the decisions that also have to be made in terms of determining how the car is going to be restored and the decisions that we make.
Yeah. Correct.
And also, so go ahead. Sorry.
No, I defer back to you on that, Donald.
well, no, but I'm just saying, in the general scheme of things, in terms of the projects that you work on, how often do decision points like that come up, and how is it best dealt with in terms of a client, in terms of the research that they've done, research that you've done, and decisions made in that form?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the client. We've done, Porsches and Jaguars. You can get a certificate of origin and understand what the color was. But it depends on, what they're looking for and what they remembered. Did they know it as a black 356 SC, or was it, when you look back at the, the card X or the build sheet, it was really, an ivory. So it does, it depends on, are they doing it to preserve and bring it back to what it was, or just to what they remember? I think makes the difference, when making those decisions.
And now I'll really put you on the spot, and this may get you into hot water with all sorts of Concord judges around the world. But what is your personal opinion, not your opinion as Automotive Restorations, what's your personal opinion about color and color change in a car?
I don't know. If you have the opportunity to put it back, I'm a purist. So if you have the opportunity to put it back to what it should be or what it was, I think too much emphasis is put on the wrong color, but I would always go back to the original if I had the opportunity.
And so if you're hypothetically confronted with a situation where a car had been painted numerous times over the course of its life, and you discover what the original color scheme was, and it's absolutely hideous to both your eyes and the owner's eyes, do you do it for historical purity, or do you say, okay, this is what it was, but let's not make the mistake that the first owner made?
Yeah, I think it depends on how hideous it is or was.
It can be challenging. Although you did mention the heritage certificates, I often find it personally amusing. Sometimes people will display quite proudly their heritage certificates, which show that the car is completely different colors than it's sitting in front of you, presented as. But that's another story for another day. But again, that also comes back to, what do you think the role of originality is? There's something which frankly came fairly new to me, probably 15 years ago or so. And it was something that was very, very familiar with the American car, especially the muscle car world, something called day one. And so you buy your new car, your Mustang, your Camaro, your Firebird, whatever it might be, You drive it home from the dealership. The very next day, you put the wheels that you want on it, you change the steering wheel, you do all those things that you want to make it your car. And it lives its life for 20, 30 years that way. It now is tired and needs a restoration. So do you bring it back to the way the factory built it? Or do you leave it the way it was to honor the life of the car itself? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, at that point, you know, you would bring it back to the period, you know, and the period upgrades are, you know, acceptable, and it should be that way, in my opinion. You know, to bring it back to stock, or, you know, how it left the factory, and that at that time, you know, I don't think is necessary. So.
Yeah, good. I'm glad we agree on that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, to me, it's all about, you know, it's about the character, the life that the car has led. You know, that I think tells us so much about what it is. And yes, you can have interventions that are not quite what you might want to do today, but nonetheless, to be able to understand the life of the object and the owners that have touched it and how they've affected it, hopefully in a positive way. And so, to people who are watching this, what would you say are your two, or maybe three even, sort of chief pieces of advice that you give to people in both maintaining their cars and also choosing a point that their cars need to be restored?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, one piece of advice is to somebody getting into the collector car world, you know, is understanding that these cars required maintenance, you know, not like a new BMW or Honda today that can go 100 or 200,000 miles without changing a spark plug. You know, you had a checkpoint, you had to, you know, change spark plugs. They're carbureted, they just didn't run that efficiently. So, you know, that would be the advice of somebody getting into the hobby. So as far as when should you do the restoration, or when does it need a restoration? You know, it depends on, you know, the individual car. Is there corrosion at this point? You know, once you start to have corrosion, you know, it continues. It doesn't stop. You know, even though you don't use it in the winter or on salty roads, it does continue to progress. So that's something you want to stop, you know, sooner than later, because it will become more costly, or get it to the point where it may not be worth doing a restoration if you're looking at it strictly from a, you know, car value to restoration cost standpoint.
Which leads to another very thorny question. Well, I won't ask one of those questions because I don't like always never propositions, but should people think about buying a car to restore to sell?
I mean, that would depend on the car and the value. You know, it doesn't usually go well if you're looking to, you know, for a return on it. Unfortunately, you know, restoration's time consuming, you know, which is labor, and you know, there's not a lot of vehicles out there, classic cars out there, I think that would make sense, you know, depending on value. So to buy it and then restore it, no. You know, to sell it for a profit, I wouldn't recommend that. No.
Yeah, it's generally never been it's seldom been, I don't use the never word, it's seldom been a road to happiness. And also the idea that, and I'll say this and then I'm going to really put you on the spot, you know, restorations are also something that are generally for the patient. Would you say that?
Yes, that's accurate, absolutely.
And now, having said that, what was the most challenging restoration that you've done in terms of time?
Time was a Seata 208 that was unfortunately in an accident, and we had a year to get it done and get it back on the show field. So, you know, it was really a cosmetic structural restoration, but there were some engine issues at that point too. It had lost oil, so there was, you know, oil starvation concern. So that was the most challenging. You know, as far as parts, that wasn't it. It was more of the manpower getting it done and getting it done. You know, there are certain processes that can't overlap or have to wait until something else is done. So that was it in terms of challenge and time.
And what is and I know that this is one of those slightly aligned to what is your favorite car question, so I apologize in advance. But what moment in your career in restoration was sort of, I won't say your proudest moment, but the moment that really sort of made you say, wow, I'm really glad I do what I do?
Yeah. You know what I like? I like the behind the scenes. I always have, and it's sort of finding that challenging part or component or more logistics of getting it done. Picasso 0150, we were looking for a set of Bosch. We knew that it came with Bosch headlights. And from day one, we knew this, and we looked and finally found a set, in the box, NOS, new old stock. And that was, it was exciting. It's rewarding. You spend all this energy and time on it to find that part, get it back to this car, and bring it back to the way it left the factory. It's sort of a small thing, but it was it's important. It's fun. It makes it sort of worth it. At the end.
No, absolutely. I've heard a lot of people say that it's about as much about the chase as about the result, and that is certainly something. And I'm really glad to hear the story about the Seata, since we have set you with a higher challenge. So the next time you're asked this question, it will be, gee, we got this ATS 2500 GTS in, and yet amazingly enough, less than a year after it arrived in our shop, there it was, gleaming and beautiful in the gallery of the Audrain Automobile Museum in Newport, Rhode Island. And, it's just going to be an astonishing thing. So we're all looking forward to that, Brian.
We are too here.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much, Brian, for being our guest tonight. And thank you all for watching. Be sure to look out for our future virtual seminars coming up, as well as our next exhibition at the museum, Women Take the Wheel, Fashion, Automobiles, and Modernity, 1905 to 1945, which will open in a few weeks at the Audrain Automobile Museum. Also, tickets are on sale for the 2021 Audrain Newport Concours and Motor Week on our audrainconcours.com website. So we hope to see you there in September and early October here in Newport. And also, of course, obviously here on our YouTube channel to watch all of our videos and the upcoming season of Mansions and Motor Cars. Thanks again, Brian, and we'll see you here in Newport.
Thank you, Donald. Thanks for having me.